Okay, hey everybody. I am so excited to interview someone I've known for the longest time, entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, business person, former track star, former model, and visionary,
Slash, right? Slash.
yeah, visionary of the year, Illac Diaz. Hey man, what's up?
Hey, Mars. Been some time, but glad to see you. Always stylish as usual, and
Thank you.
I follow what you do, and
Yeah.
so I feel our friendship from high school is this. Well, I'm representing UNESCO for the Year of Light. So it's they have a special event. I don't know. Oh, there it is. Sorry, no, it's other side.
This
So what
year's
happens
Year of
is,
Light.
yeah. So UNESCO has a very special day
Mm-hmm.
every year, yeah, recognizing that there's 1.2 billion people without access to electricity, and so this right to light is part of this. And we were there in the opening. It was fantastic in Paris, where really there was Nobel Prize winners, but also, people that were doing innovative things for access to light. And we were the Filipino and the only Filipino. I think the only Southeast Asian that were invited, and it was amazing because really from then they started really mobilizing people that companies, schools should be able to look for ways to give access to electricity and sustainable energy, and that's been my career.
Nice. Yeah, I guess like people here in the US, we take for granted that not everyone has electricity or running water in the rest of the world. So, good on you, man. And
Oh
that is
yeah.
why you recently, as in yesterday, got named Visionary of the Year. Um, so, let's see, you get a lot of these accolades and stuff like that. What does that mean to you?
Well, the Filipino way of the nonprofits has always been about philanthropy, that you'd look for money to do good things. And it was pretty hard because it was almost like begging to do something good. And so we could never really grow out of our garage or room in the house kind of thing, much less do something international. And then social enterprise came about, where really you could charge people for services to do good, and expand your equity. Of course, you receive a salary, so you cannot touch that equity. But you could basically get an office, get staff, and Litter of Light used that new movement in social enterprise. So it was more or less like a habitat for humanity of solar. We brought solar parts to the companies, like all dismantled or workshop kits. We charged them for the building it, and then if they wanted to install it and give it, we charged them for that. But we didn't charge them if we had to give it. And we worked with agencies in the government, agencies, nonprofit agencies that were giving access to communities. But we started really working with women cooperatives that we got like stocks, like 100 of it, and we started teaching them how to rent it out. And so we started to realize that kerosene was such an expensive part of their life. They were spending like 2-3 pesos in kerosene every day and burning it. And so when they could have solar, of course, for the next 5 years, it was just a matter of cents to rent it from this women cooperative. So that business model really grew. They could fix it. And we started expanding around the world to 32 countries. And so it has been really enabling
Mm.
to be able. There was also a need even 5 years ago of the growing racism against Filipinos, as Filipinos starts moving from first generation to second generation, getting more educated, higher jobs, even mayors, moving into political systems, economic systems, wealthy neighborhoods. There was a growing racism because all that we projected from here by, movies about rape or movies about destruction or poverty. And so, people called it art, and it does reflect a little bit of society, but we were not projecting certain kind of brands. It was all about misery. It was all about, disaster. And so there was a growing racism against Filipinos in other countries because of that projection. So I said we needed to come up with good things that we could do as a country to help people. Since we receive so much help, we should help. Yeah, we should.
Wow. So the light.
Go ahead.
You wanted to shine the light on the Philippines in a positive way, and you're using a liter of light. Question.
Well,
of all the things,
over here, the women are called ilaw ng tahanan, or the light of the village.
yeah.
So why not just project that internationally, that the Filipinos can be the light of the world, right?
Next.
Not the light, okay? The light. Sorry.
Yes, ilaw ng tahanan. That's right. So let's backtrack a little. Let's talk about your education. You went to Ateneo for most part. That's when I knew you, and then
running. But you got to know me because you were hanging out with the track athletes.
I was photographing,
taking pictures of them, which nowadays would be, not allowed. Just taking pictures of that.
It was very unusual. So yeah, I met you in high school, early high school, in fact. And you were on the track team, and in the Philippines, kids, it's boys and girls school, so we're not co-ed. So I thought that was pretty unusual that they would let me on the track. That's so weird. But when we were young and you were young, you did break Philippine records. Do you hold any of the records still?
Well, yeah. Actually, I held 17 years, and the last one fell. I think just 2 years ago, which was the long jump.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty good. But you have to understand, Mars. I mean, at that time, I was fed well. My mother, gave me vegetables, and I don't know what, but I was much taller than most of my classmates. But now, if I go to high school, I'm with better food and nutrition and access. I'm actually kind of small. I hit the shoulders of the new generation. So but at that time, I think times were a little tougher. Like the field was not tartan. It was soil. Everybody thinks that we had it so good. We had I had to spend like my first 30 minutes like softening up the sand, lest I break my back or have some kind of compression in my spine. But yeah, it was pretty it was tougher days. But yeah, it toughened me up, right? So.
Yeah. One of the things that I do remember you saying, and mind you guys, we were really young, and because one would think in the Philippines, the popular sports are basketball, boxing, I guess, but you were tall for that time, and so people were like, well, why don't you just play basketball? And I remember you saying you'd rather compete in a field where you could do well. And like looking at you now, it sounds like that's a philosophy you've carried through your other projects, and like leader of light. Now you are in a field where you can excel, you can do good. So I was just wondering if there was like a connection, like some kind of philosophy you've had since you were younger about, for one thing, I know you are competitive, but it's one thing to say you're competitive, it's another to say you're competitive and you win. So what do you think made you do that? Is it something in your family?
I grew up in the first contemporary art gallery in the Philippines. My mother, who's Italian, married with seeing modern art already in Italy during the time, arte povera. There was already the surrealism, there was already, modernist art happening. And so she wanted to bring this kind of beauty here in the Philippines. So she started her own gallery. The people, artists. So I must have been competitive because I would try to sketch, but I just knew that I was not going to be good enough. Maybe it was a primary instinct to impress your mother, but used to take arts because I thought that I could never become as good without realizing that these were masters. So yeah, I looked for things that were new in the household, so I could, in the Philippines, that you have guests, you have to perform. So I had to play the piano. I had, so it was just something that maybe I had to do. So anyway, up to today, I hate the fact that I don't know how to paint, or I don't know how to paint. I don't know how to do this great, especially the mother that gave me all of this access. So anyway, I was a rebel child for that. So I loved sports. I had great energy. So my mom put me anything that would exhaust me, because I was, hyperactive. So she would just like put me in swimming, horseback riding, running, so that when I got home, I would just fall asleep. And so there, I just realized that I was pretty good, with hand, motor coordination. When I was in high school, I realized that that everything was basketball, and I couldn't shoot the hoops instinctively. So once again, that fact that, oh, I'm not good at this, but I know I can find something that I'm really good at. And he realized that, I loved just basically climbing trees. I would just like scaling it. And anyway, he said, you maybe you should use your interest in other things. Anyway, so what happened was yeah, he put me in the track team, and I basically run 400 meters below 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't do that, right? You just don't do that. Maybe because my mother was chasing me to spank me for so many years, and I just grew the instinct to run faster than her hands. But yeah, and from then on, I realized that I would study. I had access to be able to study on the Philippine team, even if I was not in the Philippine team, because it was just next to my house. So I would work doubly hard to work with the proper coaches and the proper team, where in my school, people were not yet investing in the track and field. So I would have the techniques of really like the ASEAN games. I would try to pace them. Of course, I was pretty young, but for high school, I was going to start setting a different pace. So I really always wanted to be the best that I could be. And I always believed in mentorship, and I always believed in research and going out of your way. The idea I had before was, there is somebody out there practicing more than me, or has access to skills more than me. So the only way that I knew how to do it was I had to look for these mentors, and I had to be able to, find this equipment to do it. And that's what I would always do. I would have this stealth mission where I would practice on my weekends with ASEAN or Olympic class athletes. And I grew up basically on the.
So tell me about your after high school, what college was like, and where you went, and if you knew what you wanted to be.
I was a full scholar, an athletic academic scholar, entering into Ateneo. And one of the things that I did was start training in the University of the Philippines. So that's next door, right? That's the national college. And so what happened though when I was there was I started going mountaineering. So there's this thing called the UP Mountaineering Club. Great folks, really, it fostered this thing where in Ateneo it's a close, it's such a closed community, in a way protected. You don't really want to but to see the world, explore the world. And so I was started climbing these mountains. I climbed the highest mountain. I climbed Con, Apo, and I just grew this love of traveling. So this is the answer to your question, why you graduated ahead of me. On second year, I felt really trapped. I said, why am I learning all of this? And in Ateneo, it's not about, at that time, it's rote learning. You just have to memorize and spew it out. And I felt like, I was starting to learn so much about the world. And at the same time, I was also, my auntie, Gloria Diaz is, one of anyway, she said, Illac, why don't you take Saturdays, Sundays to act or to host? I mean, the point is I was making money and I realized that, I love traveling and hiking. So I took a year and a half off. It's supposed to be a year, but I started, using the skills that I got in mountaineering, learning how to camp, learning how to hitchhike. So there are some places that you have to hitchhike.
You can't do that now, guys. Don't do that now.
And with some money, took the money that I made from my first commercials and at that time, European looking was priced over here for commercials, and so they were paying good money. And so I took 4 months to travel around Australia, and then I went from Italy all the way down to Egypt and Turkey and Greece, and so I really wanted to start a class, which was travel the world and get the world to see the world as is class. And I felt trapped, but it was that I started using my skills, my strength, is into this long 5 days, 7 days mountain trekking through the Philippines and through the islands. And I just so fell in love with learning that there was a whole world out there that was not rote learning books. I wanted to start seeing the beauty, I think the patrimony that
we won't talk about the other
it's my mom's fault because she grew me up on National Geographic. So,
yes, as we're gonna say, I remember that in your room, stacks and stacks of National Geographic. That's so interesting. Speaking of your mom, so one of the things I remember, people were so shocked because here's this little mestizo boy, mestizos mixed in the Philippines, very fair. And then you would speak Tagalog, which was like, everyone's like, what? And then, but you were also super proud of your Italian heritage. You spoke Italian at home and your mom cooks really well because that's where I tasted, oh, this is Italian food. How do you think that was growing up, being mixed race in the Philippines? Talk about how obviously in the Philippines, it is an advantage being fairer skin. But how did that make you feel? Because I feel like you're more nationalistic than most people that I know. So how did that happen?
well, when you're growing up, your classmates tend to be a little bit cruel, especially if they're all a darker skin, and here comes they call them the mestizong hilaw or manggang hilaw. Manggang hilaw is is a bit lighter colored than the ripe mango, so they call you the raw mango, right? So so I really felt a little bit off, but that's what I guess my love of sports really and maybe try harder. So I wanted to feel like like the better to be better, because then I could be part of the team. So I was I was like practicing how to do baseball because I wanted people to, to get me on the baseball team. I wanted, to, there's this thing called agawan base where you call it like stealing the flag, or I
Yeah.
forgot what it is.
Capture the flag. Oh,
Capture the
yeah,
flag.
that's the same game.
People will always get me because, I would be the fastest one. So that sort of gave me a sort of like in the crowd. But then I would also be the class president. So I would try harder to be able to fit in as an outsider. I guess, that's why I think Filipinos around the world is because, they try harder in a competitive environment. And I was that, we were only two white boys, two whitish looking boys in the whole class. And up to now, Simon Sandoval,
I was
who
gonna
is,
say the
my
other guy on the track team.
the German. So we were half Italian and half.
So now you've got this mestizo advantage. You speak Tagalog, and then so that's your foray into the world of modeling. Woohoo! What is that experience like? And why did you not? I probably know the answer, but why did you end up not taking the path that some people do, which is full on become artista, enter showbiz and stuff like that?
Oh, so uh, I was, I had an allowance, but 5 months of that allowance, I could earn in one Saturday noon show. It was amazing. It was like, there was like being the few Italian Filipinos. I would have like sometimes 4 commercials airing at the same time. And it was the start. There were not that many foreigners flying into the Philippines.
Yeah.
It was still rising economy, but boy, did I really had fun. I mean, it was like sometimes I would run to class and they would say, "Hey, Mr. Diaz, you have makeup on." And I said, "Oh, do you think it's my color?" It's like it was like I would be a student, but then in the afternoon or in the weekends, I had to play a different character on TV or on movies. And the nice thing about Ateneo is you grow up with most of your class. Wow, I can will myself to be somebody. And so I would study acting, and I would study hosting. And the nice thing about this is you get to meet so many people.
Yeah.
A career for me was not about money. A career for me was just meeting, prominent people, important people, actresses. And so this gave me like really, really a wide swath in society that, I had so many friends, and it was great from being high school to finally, in grade school, in high school, being part of this, numerous commercials and fashion shows and noontime shows, which only grew bigger, which I had to leave, of course, when I went traveling. So that was, bump in my career. But yeah, I just enjoyed the fact that people knew you, people had a recall of you, and life was a little bit easier. You got invited to the best parties. But also, yeah, it was nicer. It was nicer when people were friendlier with you at a certain numerous commercials and fashion shows and noontime shows, which only grew bigger, which I had to leave, of course, when I went traveling. So that was bump in my career. But yeah, I just enjoyed the fact that people knew you, people had a recall of you, and life was a little bit easier. You got invited to the best parties. But also, yeah, it was nicer. It was nicer when people were friendlier with you at a certain point.
Very cool. It's nicer for friends of yours because being in high school, you were the only one who actually had money because you were working, right? um, anyhow,
Yeah, no, I was working. I was really working. As I said, I'd work overnight till about 12,
Mhm.
and then I would, take a couch, and then I would, but this is the interesting thing. How did I get top grades? How did I get such high grades
Mm.
that that people were wondering how I got high grades?
Okay,
So
how?
what happens was, yeah, I learned that you could buy tutors, that you could get, everybody says tutors, oh, you must be dumb. No, no. From my high school track, remember, I looked for coaches to make me better. I think up to now, you have life coaches, to make you better. But at the time, to have tutors is that you're like a idiot or failing
Yeah,
when you say it.
yeah.
But me, I completely needed them. And so I would do two things. One is I would pay for tutors to teach me. The other is, and this is, I will, I'm not proud of it, but throughout college and grad school, I would be able to give my homework, not my homework, but my study. Uh, I would hire somebody to digest it for me. And so what I would do is when things got too much, there would be a professor
Mm.
or a college student that I would pay to read my material and digest it for me, like what you guys call Cliff's Notes, right?
Yeah.
But uh, even in Harvard, I
Oh,
got some
H bomb.
professors. I got some professors to read my digital notes and summarize it for me. And so I would be able to enjoy the best of the place, but at the same time I would never be behind my notes. And so, yeah, this thing about, from school, realizing that I was not good enough and getting coaches and looking for coaches in social enterprise, looking for mentors. My whole life is, not that I was a great genius or something, but I was really thirsty for people to coach me, because I realized, and even books, I realized that I could be able to learn much faster from other people's lives than to make the mistake myself. It was just like National Geographic. When I was reading it, I could, all that I needed was to get there, and I realized how to go around and to see it. I just, uh, when Filipinos were still afraid to travel, I would buy, this, I forgot the, how do you call it, this travel books,
Lonely
this Go
Planet. Lonely Planet.
Lonely Planet, Go Italy. And yeah, so my life is run a little bit on Cliff's Notes for many years. And it's proved all the difference, because you get to compress when you read books about people that have been successful in life. So I love autobiographies. You sort of like get, you get how to speed up your life rather than making the mistakes and losing time.
Yeah, it's great. So it's basically learning from others and admitting like when there's something you're not great at, you learn from the people that are good at it. And wow, that's a great model. And remember, folks, hindi pa uso yung internet. So you had to
Yeah,
really
I couldn't Google. You can't Google
yeah,
this.
yeah. So this is cool. This is like you made your own education. So okay, from Ateneo and the world travels, you were in AIM as well, Asian Institute of Management, right? And then what was the journey to Harvard? Like how did you get there and why did you get there? You would think, okay, I've already studied enough. What made you pursue higher education?
So basically, it was interesting because I needed. When I was starting social enterprise, I started learning sign language at the Southeast Asian Institute of the Deaf, and then
Backtrack.
later,
You took that in high school.
yeah, in high school.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to attend military service, and so the only way to dodge that, which was just useless marching in the sun at that time, you have to do public service, and so the public service was to tutor in the School of the Deaf and Mute. And so I did that for 2 years to get out of military service. But I also realized that I loved doing this kind of work. Anyway, so I started doing several businesses, like selling jackets for a cause and organizing fundraising parties and uh, runs. And so from there, I realized that this was the career I wanted. I wanted a career to do good. And yeah, so in Asian Institute of Management, when I went back, I realized that I needed to know how to do social enterprise for a global, in a global. I wanted to do three things in life. I wanted to study in the world's best schools. I didn't know how to do that, and my parents didn't have the money to do that. Uh, I wanted to travel to international NGO that was showing and fundraising in school. And I did remember them showing pictures of Filipinos that were young Filipino children that were, dirty, and they had flies on their face. And it really affected me. Uh, and I asked them, like, why are you showing this? Because I was traveling at that time. And they said, well, after I started badgering them, they said, well, this is the way we raise funds. It's because we cannot get as much funds by showing healthy, happy, children. And so this affected me. I said, one day I'm going to build the foundation that will show how Filipinos can change the world. And that's what got me, in this long track, because, when I say something, I'll do it. And I realized that I didn't have the skill sets to do it. And so that's why after college, I entered into the Asian Institute of Management, because I knew with the growing social enterprise scene that I needed business skills to be able to raise funds internally, because philanthropy is not, philanthropy is something that just won't happen in your lap.
Mhm.
Even asking for money. So doing a business, you can start out with a small store, and through raising funds, you can end up with a mega mall, right? You can end up with a big business. And so I realized with the same system, you could do something that can make a big difference in the world. And that's why I needed more schooling. And so that's why I went back to school.
Nice. Okay. So after AIM, before your first enterprise would have been the shelter thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you
So,
talk about
so
that?
there was a business. So there was a lecture, what is called Serendipity Walk.
Mm.
And it says that you cannot learn everything by books, or and this is also the reason why I also took off later on. But early in the game, they had this thing around you, inspire you to have a business, to have an idea. And so one of the was to be able to go and walk around the Manila area to be able to see what the world will give you, right? That opportunities is something that you can't just like count in sitting in the screen or something, or reading a book in the library. So I was walking, and I realized that there were like literally, like hundreds of people standing around on Calao. And so I with the Serendipity Walk, you have to ask them, like, what are you doing here? How long have you been here? This is something, with work. So you have a list of questions that, sort of, but in the back of your head, you're like wondering, like, okay, what's the business opportunity here? So I realized that they are seafarers. They comprise more than 20% of the world's, ocean going crew. But they were from the provinces, and they had to stay here till they got their paperwork, right? And so they were standing there to be able to get that paperwork. This was not the digital space. So people were coming there with cartons. And so I started asking, like, how much do you spend to get here? And so a lot of them came in from the Cavite or Quezon area, which was about 50, 70 pesos each way. And so I realized that if I could charge them just $1 a day, right, which is about $50, they can do a bed. They can do a bed, and plus, if I put canteens and everything around them, I'll have a captured market. So instead of taking transport, you just pay me, and you can have a bed right there, right, next to the area. And so that was the start. I started with 50 beds where people would pay me $1 a night. And then it grew and grew and grew to 2,000 beds. So that was my first business. Basically, seafarers we're a very organized and a disciplined group of people, because you have to be disciplined and organized. They were scared of any kind of misbehavior, because if you misbehave, and I complain about you, your record will not get you on the ship.
Mhm.
So it was, and they were running the dormitory like a ship, like they would clean it themselves. It was just fantastic to have this, instead of like students, like this
Yeah.
one profession. And so
Is
yeah,
it
I
still
enjoyed
exist?
it for many years.
Yeah. Does it
And
still
then
exist?
no, I sold it. So that was my first money. So afterwards, Magsaysay lines, there were shipping lines that realized that I had this dormitories, and that it was better to just buy me off. So they bought me off.
Cool, but then that idea of having it would have been should have been obvious, but it wasn't to them. Like having your seamen in dormitories, right? So that was an innovative idea back then. Um,
Yeah, it was the first social enterprise really to grow that big.
yeah,
And people didn't know what was social enterprise at that time.
yeah, it wasn't
But
called that. Hmm.
it wasn't called that. It was just called the business. But the business of doing good is, up to today, there's just charity and business. But there's up to today, the registry does not recognize businesses that do good.
Hmm. Cool. Okay, so you start your first bit successful business helping people out. Um, Interestingly, because you had lived in the dorm briefly too when we were younger, and so that must have been something in the back of your mind that inspired you to do this kind of business, which leads me to ask, what inspired you to get into the solar space? So Leader of Light is basically building affordable solar lights, right? Um, how did you get into that?
So one of the things I went to find out was to build classrooms out of alternative architecture.
Oh, right,
So
right.
I went to MIT, where I started building out of bamboo schools, earthen schools. I started writing these were not my technologies, but for the Philippines, I was writing the book on alternative architecture, and also disaster resilient architecture, when basically there was already a growing threat for climate change over here, 200 kilometers per hour winds, and the people most vulnerable had nothing to do with climate change. It was just a country that was not producing this kind of carbon emissions, but they did not have this new kind of manual for this kind of emergency architecture. What will it look like when winds will hit 350 kilometers per hour? And so that was really something that, and what I was trying to do. I was trying to write this encyclopedic knowledge, not on myself, but I was trying to gather. I was trying international competitions. We were displaying right in the United Nations in New York. So we had this, but I realized that many of the schools I was building were not connected to electricity, and the electric company, the grid, was not interested in giving them access. And so what I did was started teaching people how to make solar lights, starting with the mothers of the children, teaching them how to build solar lights with simple electronic parts. If they didn't have money, I was putting a plastic bottle filled with water and bleach. This was in collaboration with Alfredo Moser. But Liter of Light is really light at night. And so 98%, a big percent, is just lighting at night. And so to give you a simple idea, it's basically using that you can buy anywhere,
Mhm.
and plastic bottles for the top, and then we use bamboo or ceramics. In Morocco, they use clay pots, and you can produce a solar light. So this is the basic of it. And we have, of course, mobile charging systems and street lights, and they could produce it in their for their village. But then I realized also that they also had a big problem because they kept on buying kerosene to light up the village. So now I was organizing this women group to be able to rent out solar lights, and they were making money off of it because there was already this expense for kerosene, and they were now replacing it. It started going around the Philippines, and slowly, other countries started calling it and started replicating the business. And now it goes all the way to Chile, around the world. But that was that was when I say I got into top schools, I didn't really get in right away. I actually took 3 years to enter into Harvard. I mean, it was so yeah. Basically, what people don't realize, it takes me several times. So it took me 3 years to get in. So that sort of demystifies this whole thing, that I had to try, and I had to keep on trying, and I finally was able to get in. But my my level of success is really maybe 1 out of 10. So I do know my failure rate. I do know that I have to try 9 times to get that one successful meeting. So basically, if I try 10 times, maybe 3 people or 4 people will call me back, and then one will be successful. So that's one of the things that keeps me forward. Is I realize that it's a very competitive world. The world doesn't owe me anything, but I do have to keep on trying to be finally be able to get it, and not to give up till my ratio of failure, I've sort of passed it. So sometimes I get things easier, but mostly I have a very high failure rate. And I mean, even in basketball, right? Uh, you have to keep on shooting, but sometimes the shots that count enter, and that's the shots that I remember. So nobody knows that I had to try it for 3 years to enter, if I did enter, right, and I did
Mhm.
finish. So that's one of the myths, that everything's so good. Actually, you just have to be tougher.
Right? So you're saying your childhood kakulitan has paid off because you're very persistent and you bring honor to the country. So on behalf of the Filipino people, we're very proud of you. That's really amazing. And you are
I'm very
now
excited. I'm very excited to represent the country, though. I mean, I don't have an athletic body. I don't have, the physique of a Mr. Universe. So that's not going to be there. But I am representing the country for the World Expo, which is coming up next year in October.
ooh,
And so there's a thing called Expo Live,
mhm.
where 7,000 applicants entered all over the world, and 120 were able to enter. And yeah, I'm your Philippine representative. So I'm still putting together the story. And the story of Literal Light is not just about lighting, but it's how people power can light up the world. So that's the underlying thesis of the work. There's a place called A Good Place,
Mhm.
which the 120 chosen will be given space in the expo. They have their own pavilion. And so, yeah, it's really for us all the opportunity in the world to tell a different story in the brand. So that the third one, which is to create a global Filipino brand, of Filipinos helping the world, changing the world, is something that I hope to change the way that Filipinos are viewed. That we give back, we change people's lives, and now it's going to be at the World Expo. So I really plan to use those 6 months to tell a different story than the Philippines always getting flooded and disasters and wars and EJKs.
Yeah.
It's important. It's important also that we do so, because the next generation, uh, other people should know the good that the Filipino has done. Now, this all comes together, Mars, because with the global pandemic, the front lines were really Filipinos. The race with more than 20% of the doctors and nurses who risk their lives and in fact doing the dirty work. The largest export to America has been Filipinos. So it really, for me, uh, much as I would like to talk about Liter of Light, it's kind of changed. And so I do want to use the Liter of Light as a way to emphasize how Filipinos have been the greatest humanitarian force in this pandemic. Uh, Great Britain, the Prime Minister, talks about Filipinos that took care. I mean, the first injection of the COVID, the COVID, anti-COVID was administered by a Filipina nurse, and so it's now time for the Filipinos to sort of take ownership of that. You know how the world honors its servicemen. We should tell the world, wait, you've looked down on us so long. Don't forget that when the world stopped, that the ones on the front lines and continue to serve on the front lines are Filipinos. And that's why, I did that artwork.
Very cool. Yes, no, that is definitely something you can shine a light on. Get it? Litter of light.
No
Shine.
pun. No pun intended. No pun intended.
Okay, so what's next for Illac Diaz?
Well, there's a couple of things that we're doing as we're heading for the World Expo. My life now is, of course, uh, it's pandemic here, so there's 400,000 people that are at risk because they're spreading or they have COVID, and so what happens is we have a project called Light Forward, where it's sort of like Ice Bucket Challenge, where you build a solar light in your house and then you challenge other people. So you can see this lightedforward.ph, and it's become viral. Like 400 artists are just like following it. And here, it's social media capital, so that's about 20 million followers that are now challenging each other. And so we were able to get 3,000 people to make it from their houses in Metro Manila, right? So you can have this delivered to once you accept the challenge. And we put 3,000 of this in a flag to honor the frontliners. So it always ends up with that message. And we just did this in Laguna, and it was fantastic. It was all over the news. But we plan to do this also in Rome. So it's a 500th year of the first mass in the Philippines. And so we would like to take that opportunity to do another large solar artwork. One of the things that I've learned how to do is to amass a large group of people to make solar lights. And so I hold the world record for that, where, I get, like people come out of factories with solar lights. Well, I basically ask people to make it, which is a little harder, but it's just more, there's a little bit of sweat equity in it. And so, yeah, I did it in UAE. I did it here. I did it in London. And I plan to do it in Rome and then maybe in the UAE. So right now we're planning Rome and we're planning the UAE before the event. I need something global because we're going somewhere global, right? And the thing that I want to really tell a story of is people power. That is our identity. Together we are stronger, right? So that's so far how far I've come with my expo presentation.
Wow. I hope you can travel again next year though, but I don't think that might happen right now. But good luck, and thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I know it's midnight in Manila. Thank you.
I turn into a pumpkin. I turn into a solar light.
Oh, there you go. Lighting up. Thank you very much. Illac Diaz, Leader of Light is where you can find leaderoflight.org, right? Is where you can find all the information, make a kit, challenge someone. And also, I think I want everyone to see that, learn by his example that finding the positivity in, in the world in being Filipino, and trying as hard as you can and finding those spaces where you can make a difference. I think that's it. And do it your own way, because this guy over here, like I've seen his life where he has forged paths. He's kind of a trailblazer. Um, so that's awesome. Thank you so much. We're gonna end the recording and then we can catch up some more in private for chismes. Bye guys. Thank you.